really supposed to be up here talking about Paul O., who is a representative this morning of the National Center for Science Education. Just a comment about that organization. That organization actually is the reason, or the approximate reason, that I became a part of the humanist community. Its leader at the time, Jeannie Scott, was speaking to the humanist community in Palo Alto. And I had known of the organization. I'd contributed for a few years, so I was delighted that she was going to speak. I had no idea that it was sponsored by the humanist community. So, but I just went. It was at the Jewish Community Center, and this woman accosted me when I came inside the door, insisted on my writing her. She insisted on me writing my name on a form as a new visitor to the community center. Senna got me recorded right then before I even got into the meeting. So I got on the mailing list and showed up some more. But that's entirely aside and irrelevant. My job really is to introduce Paul O., who is a member of the staff of the National Center for Science Education, who is recognizing the contributions of one of our members, and I'll let him tell the whole story, and it's a pleasure to introduce Paul O.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I really just have a short presentation. I just wanted to say thank you. I'm honored to... oh, louder? Is that better? Okay. Yeah, I'm not used to speaking into microphones. So I appreciate being able to be here. I am honored to be able to talk about, very briefly, Bob Stevens, one of your members. As Paul mentioned, the National Center for Science Education has a long history with the humanist community, so that makes it even more special for me to be able to be here. And in Bob's absence, Arthur Jackson has agreed to present the award to him, which I really appreciate as well, and everything that all of you have done to make this possible. I should say before I forget, I did bring some NCSE swag, which is down below in case you want any of it. Let me just proceed by reading a letter about the reasons why we've decided to honor Bob in this way. It's a letter from our executive director, Ann Reed, our current executive director. And it says, "Dear Dr. Stevens, Darwin Day is an international phenomenon. Celebrated by colleges and universities, schools, libraries, museums, churches, and ordinary people around the world, this special day honors Charles Darwin's legacy. It also promotes public outreach about science, evolution, and the importance of evolution education. All because you took the steps to secure funds for and help organize the first Darwin Day event at Stanford University in 1995, and then proceeded to lay the foundation to ensure the continuance and proliferation of such events. In recognition of your outstanding achievement as a co-founder of Darwin Day and all that it signifies, the National Center for Science Education is proud to bestow upon you our Friend of Darwin Award. Sincerely, Ann Reed, Executive Director, National Center for Science Education." And I will just take a moment to carefully show you the award, which I hope makes it into Bob's hands soon. One moment, I'm going to put this down. So this is the award for Bob, and we're excited to be able to present this to him. Thank you very much.
If you want to just give it to me when you finish.
Yes, I'm done actually, and I'll give this to you. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you very much, Paul, and I'm real sorry that Bob couldn't make it. He apparently didn't want to be in the limelight very much, but I will present it to him, and thank you very much. And now back to Paul Gilbert.
Thank you, Arthur. As all of you, I expect, know, the program this morning at the forum is about the American Humanist Association and the recent conference in Las Vegas. First, just a word about the American Humanist Association, which for more than 70 years has stood as the voice of humanism in the United States. It works to defend civil liberties and secular governance, and to reach out to the growing number of people who are without traditional religious faith. It seeks a continued refinement and advancement of the humanist worldview. It is driven by the desire to meet the needs of people in the here and now. One of the activities of the AHA that I have appreciated over the past few years is the annual national conference, an opportunity which brings together humanists from all over the country, and always some representatives from other countries. Not every session of every conference I have attended has moved me to write home about it, but every conference has produced some sessions and experiences that truly were worthy of writing home about. 4 members of our community attended the conference this year, met in Las Vegas. And this is our opportunity to hear what they at least might have written home about. Those 4 are Alex Havacy, Arthur Jackson, Herman Winnick. I had 2 friends in my first year in graduate school. One was Winnick and one was Wittick. I always got them mixed up. Sorry, Herman. I would say just a bit about each of them, probably more than attention than is usually given to introductions, but I think it's important that we know each other better. Arthur Jackson, I'll talk about first, has been active in humanism since 1962, when he first learned about the American Humanist Association. For Arthur, humanism comes closest to what is needed to change the world for the better. He has spent most of his life working to improve and advance it. He attended AHA's very first training session for humanist celebrants in 1962, and he worked as assistant director of AHA from 1965 to 1969. He later came to San Jose as the full-time paid executive director of the humanist community of San Jose, to experiment with developing a model to help chapters become more firmly based. He remains actively involved with the Humanist Society, which is the organization that provides preparation for those who become celebrants and helps them after they are actively functioning as celebrants. And he remains actively involved with this chapter, which he essentially helped to get started into his early growth. He's the author of Humanist Chapter of the Future of Humanism, and his most recent book, which most of you know of, and I hope some have read, How to Live the Good Life, a User's Guide for Modern Humans. Herman Winnick, sorry, Herman. You're very close to Wittick for me. He's one I could have come to envy because he went to Columbia University. I went to a college, a very small college in West Tennessee, which no longer exists. But Columbia was one of those that I had dreamed about. It wasn't to be, but Herman did get there. He has a long career as a physicist. He spoke to us not very long ago about some of his work, not so much as a physicist, which for the most of the years of his career, I think, were at Harvard and at Stanford. He is still, forgotten the term, a guy that's retired, professor, emeritus, right, still maintains an office on the campus and continues his work, now mostly directed to First, working to protect the civil rights, sometimes the physical safety of other scientists working in other countries around the world, and then with the Sesame program, which he spoke to us about. And so that's sufficiently recent. I'll not go beyond that. Alex Havasey is the next one. I was going to say a small town boy, but it was rural New Jersey, I guess, where he grew up, the third of four kids. Earned an electrical engineering degree and worked for RCA on integrated circuits for a number of years. He left there to work for National Semiconductor. One of my best friends in Minnesota also worked for National Semiconductor, but didn't have to be here to do it. He retired in 2003, and apparently has been pretty much full-time working for the humanist community since then. He certainly puts in a lot of hours now for the community. He adds, and I want to throw this in, he met Senna in a Planned Parenthood parking lot keeping an eye on anti-abortion demonstrators. I can't imagine a more fitting place to meet a future mate. They had a humanist wedding ceremony presided over by a humanist friend at an AHA annual conference. Finally, Senna grew up in a small town on the Maine coast, a beautiful, nurturing place, conservative. Sounded like they were all much one of a kind, except there was a minority of Catholics. She has strong interest. Anyone who knows Senna at all knows that her interests are strong and enduring. She has a strong interest in the support of the secular community, issues like separation of church and state, social issues like adequate support for children, and support of members of the humanist community. She's almost as old as I am. Not as old. Herman and I are exactly, we both graduated from college at the same time. I'm guessing we're the same age. But Senna still has yet to be achieved aspirations, many projects of her own. And as you know, we all know her as one who is always here working for the benefit of this community. So I'm going to give them their opportunity, and each of them their opportunity now as this unfolds, and Arthur Jackson will be our first.
Thank you, Paul. Well, let me warn you, if this doesn't appear to be perfectly organized, it's just an appearance and an accident. That we obviously spent days, hours, months putting it together, and that'll be very clear as we go along. At any rate, I'm just going to go over some of the high points on the AHA conference to give you a little bit of an introduction to the thing. Starting off, hundreds of humanists gathered on the 17th to the 20th of May in Las Vegas, Nevada, at the American Humanist Association's 77th annual conference. Attendees came together to celebrate humanism and learn more about a variety of topics, including social justice, climate change, reproductive health, and much more. Popular sessions ranged from the panel discussion, A Humanist Response to Racial Injustice by Dr. Anthony Pinn and Juan Nero Rivera, also a talk on cannabis advocacy by Chris Thompson of NORML, in a speech by Tony Van Pelt, president of the National Organization for Women, to Dale McGowan's As the American Church Crumbles, Is Humanism Ready to Step In? Participants also explored how to resist the religious right's fake news, identity, gender, or not, the problem with purity, secular Buddhism meditation, Catholics for choice, and how to grow humanist communities. As I go through this, if any one of the persons who were there cares to say more, I will give you an opportunity to do that, although it probably makes better sense just for me to shoot my wad and move on. Annual meetings of the Center for Free Thought Equality, the AHA's sister organization for lobbying and PAC activities, and AHA Board of Directors celebrated the organization's achievement over the past year, the highlights which was the historic news of the formation of a Congressional Free Thought Caucus on Capitol Hill. And I hope some of the other presenters will talk more about that, because that is truly a big deal. There was also entertainment offerings such as with a humanist twist, including the sketch comedy of local Las Vegas group Cardio Spider and the musical satire of Roy Zimmerman. 3 banquets focused on this year's awardees. On Friday night, David Suzuki accepted the Lifetime Achievement Award with a stirring call to arms to fight climate change. And that was a fantastic talk he gave. He is so committed about climate change, and I hope maybe somebody might even talk more about that. But if they don't, he's definitely worth thinking about. Humanist of the Year, Jennifer Ouellette, moved many in the crowd to tears with the story of her brother's battle with cancer and what it taught her about the importance of enacting right-to-die legislation. The evening was rounded out with the presentation of the President's Award to humanist activist and organizer Dan Blinn from the Harwood area humanists in Connecticut. Saturday's luncheon celebrated media and the arts. Humanist media awardee Anne Kasparian of the Young Turks broadcast spoke about impartial journalism in a world of fake news, as well as the importance of fighting fundamentalism. The Humanist Arts Award was presented to Devin Green and Andrew Bradley, the creative team behind the internet sensation Mrs. Betty Bowers, the World's Best Christian, who brought the house down with their satirical performance. Another great experience. Ijimo Ulo was awarded the Feminist Humanist Award at the Saturday evening banquet for her writing on feminism, race, and other social issues. In her acceptance speech, Olu powerfully challenged those in the audience and the humanist community in general to work harder to do better on racial issues and diversity, saying, "When I'm being followed in a store, I'm not thinking, I'll bet that's an evangelical. I need for you to not always be looking for the harm that others are doing, but to look for the harm that you are doing." And I think we humanists sometimes think we stand way above the rest of the population and don't recognize we're making some of the same damn mistakes everybody else is, particularly in the area of racial equality, etc. The conference closed with a moving keynote speech by Gavin Grimm, a young man who fought his school district through the federal courts for the rights of transgender people, as he told the story of his struggle for equality and recognition from his family, friends, and community. And I would just throw in that even though his folks were evangelicals and he had a lot of trouble with them, his mother finally realized what was going on in him, and she came together to support him and be there for him, and it was a an important thing, certainly an important thing for him. And when he finished his routine, there was a standing ovation. He was a deeply moving speaker. And just a few days after the conference, Grimm and the American Civil Liberties Union won a victory in the court, in his court battle, to recognize that federal law protects transgender people. And that was at the core of what he was having to go through in school and dealing with the issues about that. And now for the finale. AHA hopes you will join them in 2019 when they present a new format of virtual conference allowing more people access to the sessions without traveling great distances or paying hefty conference fees. However, in August 2020, you're invited to join them in Miami when AHA's annual conference will be held in conjunction with the International Humanist and Ethical Union. And every 4 or 5 years, the International Humanist and Ethical Union holds their conference and combines with other national centers. And now I will turn it over to Herman, who will perhaps giving you better information. But here's Herman. Hey, let's hear for Herman. You were going to be the last. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. In the heat of the moment, I forgot what I was supposed to be doing. Alex is actually going to follow up, and Herman will really be the last person in the group. So here's Herman. God. Now you know why they don't let me up here anymore. Alex, have a seat.
Thank you, Arthur. My notes. Yeah, there are several things that impressed me during the conference. In the talk by Drs. Pym and Navarro Rivera, I'm not going to try to pronounce his first name. They mentioned that they'd been involved in fighting for civil rights for a long time, and the conversation hasn't changed much. One of the quotes they threw out that kind of struck me is, if you're buying a car and you're thinking about the color and style and whether you can afford it, if you don't think about whether it's going to attract the attention of the police, you may be experiencing white privilege. He says also that all mission statements should reflect social justice. When Dale McGowan was talking in his talk, As the American Church Crumbles, I forget the full title of it, he commented that he thinks the secularization of Europe is due to socialized medicine. People have less to worry about and less to escape from. He points out that one of the side effects seems to be less charitable giving. But he says in surveys that people who attend church with friends are more generous than atheists, but those who attend alone are actually less generous. So he thinks it's not so much the belief for the church itself, but the socialization. The other person who impressed me was, oh darn, my notes are not complete, Jennifer Owett, who was the, Arthur, give me a hand here.
Humanist of the Year.
Humanist of the Year, yes. And she talked about death with dignity and how doctors, from her experience, doctors ought to be more honest, that the patient deserves that. She says death with dignity should be nationwide and streamlined, and loved ones will have to just deal with their own denial. She recommended a book by Atul Gawande, Being Mortal, which I'll have to look into and maybe get back to one of these days. I was always a fan of Betty Bowers, by the way, and when Devin and Devin and Andrew spoke. I was impressed. I was also it was nice just to watch Betty, you know, in addition to a radio program, she just kind of poses there properly, you know, and I realized they mentioned earlier that she was a judge on RuPaul's Drag Race, and I can kind of see that, you know. Watching her there, I thought, if I could pose like that, I'd do drag. The other one was another difficult name, Ijeoma Oluwet, who was Feminist Humanist Award. And she again talked about prejudice, and someone had asked her, do people take you for a Google for your minority, and how does that and how do you deal with the fatigue that comes from that? And she responded to that, and one of her comments was that you should ask yourself, before you ask a question of a minority person about being a minority, you should ask yourself, should I Google this first? She says you should look at where you're privileged, and just to see how you support oppression. Apparently, we all do that, and it was almost difficult to watch. It really made you examine your own stance on things. Another comment she made was, if you're at a restaurant and there's no handicap ramp, you really should talk to the manager about it, even if you're not inconvenienced. Some other things that were not mentioned earlier, one of the early videos was Science Moms. It's a documentary about women who are concerned about all the hype about the dangers of GMO and anti-vax people. As she put out, natural is not necessarily good. Nature will kill you. The other thing is, we went on the tour, what do they call it? The post-conference tour of Red Rock Canyon, which was interesting. I like the comment that our guide made, that it's nice to know that he doesn't have to tell people how old these structures are. That's the gist of my presentation. Senator, would you come up? Oh, excuse me. Are there any questions? Okay, I'll wait.
Well, are the little books, who was going to pass out the little... You did already, okay. Well, I probably start with that. I had a few other minor things to say, but since the books are out there, this is a new children's book series aimed at countering superstition and misinformation in young people's minds. Becker presented an introduction to his work at the American Humanist Association conference. There's a quote, "How our atoms rejoin the universe, which remains forever changed by our lives. And most of all, how morality can inspire us to appreciate the incredible opportunity we've been given to live the best, most meaningful lives we can, surrounded by the people we love." That's because Becker is a humanist who prefers to inspire scientific wonder and critical thinking. Children, another quote is, "Children are our future problem solvers," he says, "and problems stem from ignorance." The first three titles include the story of life about evolution. Oh, the things we believed about critical thinking, and worlds within us about the Big Bang and the earliest stages of the universe. They're beautiful little books, and they're just wonderful for letting children know all the truth about all the stuff they might pick up along the way. They're designed for children from 5 to 12. They're conceived in such a way that the older the readers are, or the more time they have looked at the text, the more will leap off the page and grab their attention, especially as their reading skills mature. So, I had to mention about the banquets, aside from all the uplifting talks we heard. It was the best food that I've ever had at a conference. It was superb. It was surprisingly superb. And I have to say, we had a picture taken. I usually take a picture and publish it and stuff. Unfortunately, this year, someone else took the picture with my camera, and it's all blurry, so it's useless. One interesting fact was that the several of us who were up there, Debbie Allen, our former executive director, slipped in one end, kind of half hidden, and I was looking forward to moving her a little further into the picture, but the picture's useless. And two little quotes. I'd say people gather because they seek community, they seek connection, a sense that life is bigger than their individuality. For some, this desire for connection also entails interest in the labor necessary to maintain that community. However, this dimension of work isn't always in place for all. And a final quote I liked: attendees come together to celebrate humanism and learn more about a variety of topics, including social justice, climate change, reproductive health, and much more. And that's the end of my presentation. Who is next? You? I think so. We don't want to leave this uncovered, so I shall just hand it to you.
Well, I think Senna and others covered the high points of the meeting. I have a few. Okay. I can make a few other points. It was my first such national meeting, and I can highly recommend it. The speakers were outstanding. You've heard some of the highlights of the speakers. I'll mention some more. And also make sure that you know that next year they're going to a different format for this annual convention. Instead of having it at one place, particularly a terrible place in my opinion like Las Vegas, they're going to decentralize it. And so there'll be many places around the country in which there'll be speakers, and there'll be video connections, I believe, so that people all around the country can hear the speakers at each place. And one of the places is the Bay Area. And I think it's an opportunity for this community to play a role in that. It's a year from now. They talked about possibly having Stanford University be the venue, but it might as well be this place if we still have it. But in any case, wherever it is in this community, we can play a role, and we should have a role in organizing the speakers and the program for next year. The year after that, it's in connection with the International Humanist community, and they're having it in Miami, so that people from Europe and elsewhere in the world could possibly attend, and it would be international. So I think I would highly recommend going to these meetings, because it's quite an experience to be immersed for several days with so many people with similar values. Very invigorating. I enjoyed it very much. I also would like to make you aware that all the invited speakers, which were the outstanding parts of the program, were recorded, and they're still in the process of putting those talks on YouTube. We'll let you know when I'm going to be monitoring that, because I think those talks were outstanding, and I think, in fact, that we might use a video of a couple of those talks as one of our Sunday forums, and that people could listen to what we think were some of the outstanding speakers. It was great to see Debbie Allen there. She's in the management of the Secular Coalition for America, and she played a major role in this meeting, and it was good to see her again. One of the outstanding talks was on white privilege, something that I think we all need to think more about. Buying a car, was mentioned, and making sure that the car you buy doesn't alert the police in some way or other, that if you're black, that is. It reminds me of my time when I was working at Harvard University. I worked with a black engineer who had a rather high position and had a very good car. He had family in the South, and he would go there frequently. And he learned the hard way that when he crossed a certain line in Maryland or Virginia, driving this nice car to avoid being stopped arbitrarily by police, he put on a chauffeur's cap. And that worked. So the police didn't think that this was an uppity black person who should be pulled aside and fined. There were outstanding talks on, you've heard, on climate change, right privilege, fake news, the world's best Christian. I was particularly impressed by the talk about hidden racism, the fact that all of us have something due to the nature of our society that it brings to mind the recent incident at Starbucks, where the police were called because one of the coffee makers, or the manager of the place, saw two black guys sitting there and assumed that they were up to no good and called in the police. They were not up to no good, they were doing no harm, and yet he wouldn't have done that if there were two white guys just sitting there. So we have many examples of that, and I think we should be very aware of white privilege. The emphasis on LGBT was also very informative, especially the keynote speech at the end of the meeting, the last speech. I forgot his name. Gavin, yes. A very emotional speech, which was the only speech that got a standing ovation at the whole conference, relating his experience as a transgender person. So, I don't have more to say. I think we should open it up to comments, or if anyone wants to hear more about any one of the particular topics, this would be a good time. Yes. Here it comes.
It's just a little joke, but the driver with the cap should have had a fake Miss Daisy in the back.
Yes, Driving Miss Daisy, a wonderful movie.
Any other questions?
Not a question, but your comments about the chauffeur's hat reminded me when I was growing up and quite relatively young, still I think even a teenager, and realized racial prejudice was just an unacceptable thing, and I threw my chest back and say, I'm above all that. I'm not into such a thing. And then I was reading in a paper about a black person who was elected president of his group. And in my mind was, how could a black person be president of the group? I mean, that just doesn't make any sense, all these white people. And I realized that prejudice is embedded deeper than we can dig out. But it needs to be kept being worked on.
And there was at least one talk on that, which made that point very clearly with many examples. Yes?
I was wondering if anybody could clarify the videos that we can see online. You said you would notify us. How do you think you'd do that? And
well,
also, does anybody know, are they going to be a year from now, a month from now, 2 weeks from now?
It's disappointing because it's been a couple of months already. I actually spoke to Royce Peckhart, the national director of the American Humanist Association, and he was very apologetic that they're not up yet. He said they're still working on it. I intend to monitor that, and we'll let people know. So we'll certainly let you know. As I said, the talks were really material that should be shown here during the Sunday forums, at least a few of them. So I intend to pursue that.
Just a comment, Herman, on the issue of white privilege and unconscious bias. The Bay Area is actually quite a center for work on that. There are several organizations, including particularly the Equal Justice Society, which is based in Oakland, headed by Eva Jefferson Patterson, who is an awesome thinker and leader. And there's some others. And I think we could probably get someone from one of those groups to speak to us. And I will certainly be happy to share information about events coming up by those organizations so that people can participate in them. I have gone to quite a few, and they are really, really good.
Well, I'd like to ask a question. What did you think of Anna Kasparian's talk? Did you listen to hers?
I did. She talked about fake news, as I remember. Is that right? I mixed these talks together. The Young Turks, right. I don't have particular recollections of my impression then. Does someone else remember the highlights of her talk?
Well, I'd like to put in a plug for her and the show called The Young Turks. It's on video. They have videos on YouTube, quite a lot of them. And her partner is Cenk Uygur, who is a Turkish-American commentator. And they both are very critical of the establishment of Republicans, Trump, et cetera. Those are one of the few liberal panels on YouTube. And she's an Armenian American paired with a Turkish American, and which has raised the ire of a lot of Armenian men. But she defends herself very well.
Turkey is a country we should be watching very closely. I listened on the radio coming up here that 18,000 academics and journalists and others in Turkey have been in prison as a recent fallout of the coup attempt that failed some months ago or last year. And just to let you know, there was a poll recently. The two countries that have the highest percentage of people who do not believe in evolution are the U.S. and Turkey. So keep that in mind. I have many friends in Turkey, and they are very depressed about what's going on in that society.
Did anyone at the conference speak on income and wealth inequality?
I don't remember. Anyone else remember? Alex?
No, I don't. I had a comment on something else. I don't recall any comments on wealth as such. I did want to say, though, that from my notes on Anna Kasparian, she did speak about maintaining dialogue with people you disagree with. Treat them with respect, and you'll learn something.
Good idea.
I guess I had never thought of it, the idea, but when I was younger, I used to like to drive red cars. I owned two of them, and it's the only time in my life I've ever been stopped by policemen. So there are some interesting, especially if I was in the fast lane. It's really, really interesting. So that sort of reminded me, I guess I never thought about that before. But I guess if I were black, it would be a hell of a lot worse.
Yeah, that's called Arrest Me Red. Any other questions?
Well, I just wanted to add a little note to what we said. It was introduced as being from a very conservative town, and they said a sprinkling of Catholics. There was one Catholic family, and we were it.
Okay. Sympathy to you.
Well, on the red car thing, in my mind, it's a little more complicated than black people might think. driven a red car for a long time. And the thing I realized, like when I go into a store and I go out to find my car, and I say, oh, there's my car. And if you drive the normal kind of car, and this I think refers to cops, you know, cops are looking around, and what's there? They see a red car, oh, it catches their eye, they pay attention. You see a silver car or a gray car, there's 50,000 of them out there weaving in and out, and it slips out of their mind, I think. So I think it's a more complex thing, but that doesn't detract from what happens when cops can recognize you, see you.
Yeah, cars tend to go with different groups. A story about a group like this where someone says, there's a silver Prius outside with the lights on. Someone should go out and everyone gets up and leaves.
Rotate the mic forward.
Okay. Any more comments, questions? Yes?
Book available for purchase here?
Senna, she's impressed by the book that you distributed. Can we purchase them, she says.
You can, I'm sure it says how to order them, but no, those are the three I bought at the conference, and they're all in conference.
Barbara, just take that one. Okay. I want to thank Paul for his introduction, covering the fact that I'm retired and have many of these activities. The one problem is I am retired and I do all these things at the lab. I'm at SLAC and Stanford. The problem is they stopped paying me. So it's a bit of a problem, but I enjoy what I'm doing. Yes?
Pass your hat around.
Nobody else wants to speak. Okay, can you be more clear, or can anyone be more clear about this virtual conference next year and these sub-conferences? Are we going to host a 3-day, 2.5-day, 2.5-day conference? Is that right? We would do that in these various centers?
I would encourage people like you who are interested to literally call the main office of the American Humanist Association, ask to speak to Royce Beckert. He's very available, very informative. My understanding in answer to that is that it's a work in progress. They intend to identify maybe half a dozen places around the country and ask them to think about maybe themes that they would like to emphasize and speakers and somehow interconnect them to avoid several hundred people going to one central place with the cost and the impact on the environment of air travel, etc. There's been a lot of criticism of these national meetings which bring together hundreds or thousands of people with consequences on environmental pollution.
Yeah, and I guess locally, if you had local speakers, you would have to have local video connection as well.
Right.
Yeah. I've done this. I belong to a couple of groups that have begun to do this recently. It can work okay, but unfortunately, sometimes the videos drop, which is a problem, so we'd have to figure out how to work some of that out.
Well, you should help with that, okay.
This leads to some conjecture on my part. I recently attended a conference at UC Berkeley put on by the Haas Center there, another one that's fantastic on
human rights
issues around human rights and racism. And they and Johns Hopkins University were co-sponsors of a one-day, but all-day and evening conference. And there were speakers at both places. And fortunately, there were a couple of glitches, but in the main, it went seamlessly to hear the speakers that were in front of you in your auditorium, and also to hear the speakers in the other auditorium when they were speaking. And in fact, it worked quite well for Q&A with people from both areas. So if that's the kind of thing that's proposed, I think it could be a very successful and get a lot more people involved.
Well, we should certainly be involved with that, and due to the uncertainty of where we're going to be a year from now, it's a little hard to know what to do. They did already identify Stanford University as a possible one of these hubs around the country, and I intend to look into that and try to do that together with our humanist community here.
The usual way that they've done it is they come out, and it's going to be a problem with so many centers, but what they usually do is pretty much they send out their own people and they do most of it, and the local group helps however they can or want to. But that might be a problem with several centers around the country, that they wouldn't be able to staff all of them.
Well, I think they have to disseminate some of those details. And again, I would really encourage people, look up the phone number of the Washington headquarters of the American Humanist Association, call and ask to speak to the national director. He's very reachable, and I think he should know about interest here and get more information about the plans for next year. And tell him that we're waiting for the videos, because he's very frustrated by the fact that it's taken so long.
Sounds as though you've got that covered.
Well, I think more complaints might help.
What did you learn about successfully building a local humanist community?
When did I learn?
To the whole panel.
Oh, I see. Okay. Well, I forgot how I learned about. I came to some meetings a few years ago, then it sort of dropped.
I'm sorry, at the conference. What does AHA, what wisdom have they provided about successes in other communities?
Well, I think, as Senna said, they provide speakers and videos and materials and all kinds of propaganda, I would call it, about humanism. There's some 200, is that the right number? Local branches such as ours, and they're very supportive of it.
I couldn't find many of my notes, but I did find a bunch about that. Unfortunately, I thought I had it with me. They talked a lot about keeping in touch with people, birthday cards, hit them often. And I don't remember too much about it, but I have notes on it if somebody's interested in the future.
And I just comment that they're Humanists of the Year on the wall back here that Senna has put up. And just another, did Debbie put them up? That Debbie put up. Another good way to remember Debbie. Are there other questions or comments? On the question of the kind of issues that Herman mentioned about following up on, many of those will be covered in your Humanist magazine, and just inside the front cover you can also find the number for Roy Speckart, and so you can call and congratulate them on their ideas and ask them, bug them a bit about getting the videos up there and information about the next year's conference. Just one further comment on that. I'm sure what they'll be looking for is institutions like Stanford, where they have huge amount of expertise in doing the video stuff and sharing with other institutions, and try to place the centers in such institutions so they don't run the risk of people that are not equipped to do it. Perhaps you have more.
One of the things I talked to Roy Speckart about is, as a physicist, I was very proud that Krauss, whose picture is up on the wall, was Humanist of the Year, but he's also been the target of the Me Too movement, and several women have accused him, and they're wrestling now with how to deal with the fact that one of the people they honored has now been besmirched by a number of women who have complained about his actions. So you might have some opinions about that. You might convey them to Roy Speckart too. They need to decide what to do about their previous honoring of Krauss.
What do you think they should do?
Well, it's a tricky thing. I think they should publicly acknowledge that someone who has been very supportive of humanism and has been recognized has now been involved with these activities. And I think one of the things they're going to do is, or they should do, is do a more careful vetting of people before they honor them, as an example.
If there are not other comments or questions, let me ask you to, we do have one at the back. Let me get this mic back to you.
Oh, hi. With regard to your suggestion of Stanford being a good location for hosting a conference, the Green Party put on a conference, a state conference there, about, 15 years ago, 10? And Stanford was a really good location. We were in the history building, kind of close to the front. There's an auditorium there, and the corner of the history building. Yeah, right near the quad. And so they were very helpful. You needed to have somebody at Stanford to make the connection. Would that be you?
Well, as I told you, they stopped paying me, so I don't know.
Anyway, and they were very helpful about getting the venue ready, and the only thing we had to bring was a microphone stand. And but they also turned out they could cater your event, and we did have them cater it, and they did a great job. They had, coffee and tea and breakfast, and then they had lunch, and it was really, really well done and not that expensive.
Well, I will look into it and try to get some organization at Stanford that has interests that overlap with this.
All right, if there are no other questions. Oh.
One more.
Could somebody that attended talk a little bit about the age demographic at the conference and how that bodes for continuation of the humanist community?
Arthur, yes. Arthur needs the mic. Coming.
Well, let me speak to that topic in general. Hello. I think Fred Edwards gave the best response to this issue that I've ever heard. And he says, many of you are aware of the American Association of Retired Individuals. And that organization seems to be growing very nicely and existing, and no danger of going out of business.
Okay. Well, they are concerned, as we are, nationally and locally.
But you really didn't answer his question. How was the age demographic of the conference?
Not too different from what we have here, I think. I didn't have actual numbers, but I think there was a lot of people my age or whatever.
However, there were many young people, and they even had young children that because they had a program set up, actually was involved with Camp Quest West. The person whose name escapes me at the moment, but who helps to have activities there so you can come with children and they will be taken care of. And there were a lot of college students and that kind of thing. So they were there, but they certainly weren't the overwhelming number.
It's also been pointed out that the sexes are, women are in the minority in the humanist community. So it's not just, it's something to think about, that that both youth and women are maybe we're too abstract for them, I don't know.
But I think you and others make up for it by your activism and contributions, Senna. So.
Following up the same questions, what is the diversity population in the humanist community?
I would look at the website for that. I don't have those numbers offhand, but again, if you can't find it or I can't find it, mention that to Roy Specker, that you'd like information about that and what recommendations they have for getting more involvement of college and even high school students.
Yeah, I think,
Oh,
again, it's predominantly white. There are a significant number of Asian and black people there, but still predominantly white. And I think that's probably got something to do with the age. You know, that not that there aren't older black and Asian people, but it's I don't know. I had something there and I've lost it.
Senna has a comment.
30 years ago when I first joined this group, it was all just about all male. But there was a brilliant woman, Paula Rochelle, who was the person who married us. And it was just a joy to watch her with her flip charts, putting these men through their paces. It was very, just made me feel really good.
Well, it's great that you joined then. She mentioned she joined 30 years ago when she was 15.
Roy Elder is my name. I came here in the late 50s, before 62, and at that time, the humanist group was mostly married couples.
Mm-hmm.
And I was married too.
Any other questions? If not, I'll turn this over to Paul Gilbert, who has an important message for us.
Well, let's give a big round of applause to the four who shared their experience.